Hello, my name is Krista Laurie, and this is my first post for my final course project. So in this post, I just kind of want to give an introduction about what my theme will be and what I want to focus on throughout the semester. So for my project, I want to do a video diary focusing on a common theme I've seen in various forms of literature throughout time, and perhaps even more so in African American literature. And this is the theme of religion. I want to discuss some of the ways that religion is being portrayed, as well as what the significance of religion is in whatever the context was. Specifically, I want to look for whether it might be in terms of hope, rebuke, or anything else meaningful. Anyways, I'm really looking forward to learning more about this topic throughout the semester. Hello again. So the first work that I want to talk about this semester in terms of religion is Octavia Butler's Parable the Sower. Religion was a very key aspect to this novel, although it was not portrayed in the typical way that I was expecting. I was expecting most of the African American literature I studied to talk more about aspects related to Christianity. The main character of this novel, Lauren, though, actually rejects Christianity. She grew up with it, and she participates in a fictional religion called Earthseed. The essential basis of this religion presented in the novel is that God is change. This quote that I'm going to read from the novel describes what God was defined as in this particular religion. God is power, infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent, and yet God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped, God is change. So God in this context is not necessarily positive. The fact that words like trickster and chaos were used goes very much against the typical Christian viewpoint. But overall, the significance of religion in this context of the story was that it could change as the main character, Lauren, changed, and could help her to adapt in a way to the harsh conditions she faced living in a dystopian universe, which takes place in the story. So while this is obviously a fictional religion, it's not what African Americans throughout history dealt with. It still goes to show the power of religion in terms with hope and coping with the struggles of life, which I believe is a very important theme. Thank you for listening. Hi again. So another piece that I want to discuss today is Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman speech. This is an incredible speech that truly became a power motivator in the quest for women's rights. Even to this day, it still serves to symbolize the strength that women can have. One aspect that is really very powerful throughout her speech, though, is the constant referral to God and to religion as a support for her claims. She refutes many arguments relating to Christianity about why women shouldn't have rights, including that Jesus was a man, pointing out that Jesus came from a woman, and also the argument that women were the first ones to sin in the story of Adam and Eve. She states the following in regards to this. If the first woman ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. Overall, the speech is powerful in that it not only provides an outspoken voice for African Americans, but also a women in general. In context of the speech, I believe that rather than religion being referred to in terms of hope, it is used as a support for her arguments, or maybe even mocking people who have twisted religion to fit their views of what women's roles should be in society. Overall, I think that the story offered a really interesting perspective on religion and how it can be important in various forms of literature. Thank you for listening. Hello again. So the author that I would like to talk about today is W.E.B. Du Bois. Specifically, I would like to refer to his piece titled A Litany for Atlanta. This is a poem that, in a sense, is a direct outcry to God for help. The narrator of this poem describes awful situations that had been brought about to him and to other black people without sin or faults of their own, and they ask God to alleviate them of some of this injustice. At the end of each section of this poem, actually, it addresses God in a different way, asking him to bring them help in their hard times. I want to read a passage right now that is a response that the narrator makes after questioning whether God was really going to come through because he wasn't seeing direct progress. So I'm going to read that right now. Forgive the thought, forgive these blasphemous words. Thou art still the God of the black fathers, and in thy soul's soul sit some of the darkenings of the evening, some shadowings of the velvet night. But whisper, speak, call, great God, for thy silence is white terror to our hearts. The way, O God, show us the way and point us the path. So overall, it's clear to see that in this context, God was looked at in terms of hope and relief of the injustice brought about to the black people. There was no doubt questioning the fear associated with this hope, but nevertheless, it is extremely significant to see how the response of God was so important to these people in their times of trouble. Thank you for listening. Hello again. So the author I would like to talk about today is Langston Hughes. This is obviously one of the most popular names when it comes to the Harlem Renaissance, and his work is recognized by just about anyone to this day. What he is not particularly known for, though, are aspects of religion or Christianity relating to his work. But one work in particular of his that does discuss this is a poem titled Christ in Alabama, and I believe that this poem really does explore some important aspects to note relating to Christianity. His main argument throughout this poem, though, was that Christ was black in a sense, whether he is referring to Christ's actual dark skin color, which there are documentations of, or whether his sufferings resembled those of blacks in the past is made unknown, but it is very clear throughout the poem that there was some symbolizations between the two. He even ends his poem with these following 3 lines. N-word Christ on the cross of the South. So that symbolization is very clear. Anyways, my interpretation of this poem, though, is that because Christ suffered like many African Americans may have suffered, that Langston Hughes wants black people to be able to relate to him in a way and have some peace because of this. It's also entirely possible, though, that he could have been mocking religion altogether just based off of some of the things that were said in the poem. I think a really powerful poem, though, does have many interpretations, and because of this, it could have had a variety of meanings to African Americans based off of what they were going through, and I believe that it's a very important piece in this way. Thank you for listening. Hello again. So the author I'd like to talk about today is James Baldwin. Specifically, I would like to discuss this piece titled Going to Meet the Man. So the main character of this piece, Jesse, is not a very good man to say the least. He tortured black people, did unspeakable things to black women, he was constantly using derogatory terms to describe them, and even enjoyed witnessing a brutal murder of an African American man during his childhood. But regardless of his horrible behavior, he still considers himself to be a Christian. The following quote I am going to read from the novel describes what his views of Christianity are and how this relates to African Americans. So, they were singing for mercy, they hoped to go to heaven, and he had even sometimes felt when looking into heaven, or of what God was or could be for them, God was the same for everyone, he supposed, and that heaven was where good people went, he supposed. So he was describing heaven here as a place for good people, and he thought that he was deserving of this place. Even though he obviously wasn't and he had done horrible things, he still thought that he was a good person who deserved this. So I believe that through this piece, Baldwin was kind of trying to point out the blatant hypocrisy of some white people in relation to their religion and how they treat black people. And his purpose may have even been to call them out on this and to have them check their actions, check their faith, so that they could not end up like this main character, Jesse, who was obviously portrayed as very undesirable. So this piece was overall a very unique and powerful one in relation to religion and how people should act if they were a true member of their faith. Thank you for listening. Hello again. So now I want to talk about an author who was very prominent during the civil rights and Black Power movement. This man is Malcolm X. Malcolm is known for his outlandish viewpoints on how African Americans should achieve their freedom, even if it meant resorting to violence. He very clearly spoke what he meant. The main driving force behind his actions, though, was his relation to the black Muslims and Islam. He became associated with the leader of this religion, Elijah Muhammad, and engaged in the religion and put it together with black Muslims obtaining freedom. The following quote from him in his autobiography explains what he thinks about white oppression and ties it together with his views on God. Indeed, how can white society atone for enslaving, for raping, for unmanning, for otherwise brutalizing millions of human beings for centuries? What atonement would the God of justice demand for the robbery of the black people's labor, their lives, their true identity, their culture, their history, and even their human dignity? So God, in this context, is referred to in terms of justice and atonement rather than in common aspects like hope or love. So this really is a unique quality to be emphasized, but it does truly make Malcolm X a unique and powerful leader in the quest for civil rights movement, and he did end up impacting thousands of people in ways that other leaders were not able to, so he was very successful in that way. Thank you for listening. Hello again. So the person I would like to discuss today is Martin Luther King Jr. So this is obviously one of the biggest names when it comes to the civil rights movement, as well as the development of rights for black people in general. Martin Luther King Jr. also, however, is known for his strong faith in God and his leadership within the Christian church. He was even a preacher. For example, a very popular piece of his was titled "A Letter from Birmingham Jail." He references God constantly in what was essentially his outcry for civil rights and his plan to accomplish them. What I think is really most incredible about him, however, is that he uses the Bible as encouragement for him to carry out his mission in order to ensure freedom for black people as well as to spread the word of God. So I would just like to read a passage right now that really explains this in a clear way. Just as the prophets of the 8th century BC left their villages and carried out their "Thus saith the Lord" far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns, and just as the Apostle Paul left his town of Taurus and carried the gospel of Jesus to the far corners of the Greco-Roman world, so am I compelled to carry out the gospel of freedom beyond my own hometown. Like Paul, I constantly respond to the Macedonian call for aid. So it is very clear to see from this passage that Martin Luther King was widely devoted to his faith and even felt comparable to the Apostle Paul, who was essential and even wrote a majority of the New Testament in the Bible. And that man was known for going out of his town, essentially giving up his life to spread the word of God. And Martin Luther King really felt that he was trying to do that through his work. So overall, Martin Luther King, his faith in God and religion for him played a vital role in not only who he was as a person, but also his motivation to bring rights and freedom to those surrounding him. So religion was absolutely essential in this context, and it ended up impacting a lot of people in indirect ways. Thank you for listening. Hello, so I've reviewed quite a few pieces and authors this semester that either had aspects of their work relating to religion or were entirely about religion. So now I would just like to draw some overall conclusions based off of what I have encountered thus far. So at the beginning of this project, I expected to find common themes throughout most of the literature I reviewed, whether these themes were about hope or rebuke or just anything else kind of common. But what I discovered, however, was that each piece was truly unique in this way. There is no true overarching statement I can make about religion in relation to African American literature. Religion was portrayed in a variety of contexts dependent on whom it was being portrayed by and what conditions they were living under. In some cases it was taken almost lightly, it was just kind of part of the story. In other cases it was very serious and it was almost all-encompassing. One theme, though, that is consistent throughout all these works, though, is that the importance of the literature and the history behind it as a whole. Specifically, in the context of African American literature, it is widely influenced by faith through a variety of mediums and under a variety of contexts, and it will be remembered throughout time to come for this reason. Even if the context of society changes, it will still have great importance in that way. Anyways, I just want to thank you so much for listening to my video diary, and I hope you too have gained a wider understanding of the importance of religion within African American culture and literature. Thank you so much.